For 13 years, the trucks arrived every Thursday. Like clockwork. 7:30 in the morning. Sometimes earlier. Never much later. The drivers never stayed long. They backed up to the fence, raised the dump beds, unloaded piles of rough-cut white oak, and disappeared back toward the lumber yard. Most people assumed Margaret Hale hated those trucks. She didn't. She looked forward to them, because every load brought another opportunity. The strange arrangement began in 1992. Margaret had recently inherited 85 acres from her grandfather, Samuel Hale. The property bordered the county lumber yard. For years the mill struggled with one problem: short oak cutoffs, twisted slabs, live-edge offcuts, wide pieces too valuable to burn but too irregular to sell as dimensional lumber. Hauling them to a landfill cost money. Burning them wasted good hardwood. One rainy afternoon, the lumber yard manager knocked on Margaret's door. He removed his cap. Afternoon. Margaret smiled. Come in. Instead, he pointed toward the fence. We've got a question. Silence. Then, what kind? He rubbed the back of his neck. Mind if we dump oak behind your north pasture? Margaret frowned. Why? We're paying to haul it away. Long pause. So. He shrugged. If you've got room. Margaret looked across the pasture. The back corner stayed unused. Rocky ground. Poor drainage. Nothing much happened there. How much? The manager laughed. More than you'd believe. Margaret smiled. Fine. Neither of them realized they had just changed the next 20 years. The first truck arrived the following Thursday. Then another the next week. Then another. The piles slowly grew. Most pieces looked useless. Crooked. Uneven. Odd lengths. Bark still attached. Some neighbors called it junk. Others called it firewood. Samuel called it something else. One evening, when Margaret was 16, she followed him toward the growing piles. He picked up a thick white oak slab, ran one hand across the grain, then smiled. Pretty. Margaret laughed. This? Samuel nodded. Most beautiful board here. She looked again. It seemed rough. Ugly. Worked. What do you see? Samuel turned the slab into the sunlight. Golden rays revealed rich, swirling grain hidden beneath the rough surface. Furniture. Margaret frowned. Nobody could build with that. Samuel chuckled. The tree already did the hard part. Years later. Those words never left her. After Samuel passed away, Margaret inherited more than land. She inherited a woodworking shed, old hand planes, cabinet makers' chisels, woodworking books, and dozens of notebooks. Some documented furniture designs. Others described wood drying techniques, joinery, wood movement, finishing oils, everything. One sentence appeared repeatedly. Straight boards build houses. Interesting boards build heirlooms. Margaret read it countless times. At first it sounded poetic. Eventually, it became a business plan. The lumber trucks continued arriving every Thursday. The oak piles became enormous. People joked about them constantly. One Saturday morning at the diner, Dale Harper looked out the window toward Margaret's truck. There she is. Rick looked up. The lumber lady? Dale nodded. The junk collector. Laughter spread around the room. Not cruel. Comfortable. The kind reserved for people everyone believed they'd figured out. One farmer asked, How much firewood you got now? Margaret smiled. Too much. Dale laughed. You planning to heat the county? Long pause. No. What then? Margaret looked toward the hills. Tables. The table erupted. Even louder than before. Tables. From scrap. Those crooked boards? Margaret simply nodded. Nobody believed her. For good reason. She'd never sold furniture. Never operated a workshop. Never advertised anything. At least not yet. The following winter, she opened Samuel's woodworking journals again. Every evening she practiced. Hand-cut dovetails. Mortise and tenon joints. Tabletop glue-ups. Hours became weeks. Weeks became months. The first table looked terrible. The second looked slightly less terrible. The third almost stood level. By the 15th, something changed. The grain. The character. The live edges everyone called defects suddenly became beautiful. Margaret stopped seeing scrap. She started seeing stories. One evening her younger brother Nathan wandered into the workshop, which shavings covered the floor. Half-finished tables leaned against every wall. He stopped, looked around, then laughed. You're doing it again. Margaret looked up. What? The workshop. Silence. The workshop. Nathan smiled. That means you're obsessed. Long pause. Then, probably. He picked up a finished tabletop. ran his hand across the smooth oak. This came from the pile? Margaret nodded. Thursday's delivery. Nathan looked back toward the fence. I would have burned it. I know. Spring brought the county craft fair. Margaret rented the smallest booth available. One dining table. 2 benches. Nothing more. People admired them, complimented them, touched the grain, asked questions. Nobody bought. The drive home felt disappointing. Nathan tried encouraging her. They liked them. Margaret sighed. They didn't buy them. He shrugged. They remembered them. She wasn't convinced. The second craft fair produced one sale. A retired couple bought a dining table. They insisted on paying cash. Margaret loaded it into their trailer herself. As they drove away, she stood quietly watching. Not because of the money. Because for the first time, someone wanted something she'd built. The orders remained slow. Very slow. One table. Then another. Then another. Restaurants began asking about larger tables. A bed and breakfast ordered 6. A local winery requested tasting room furniture. Margaret never advertised. Every order arrived through recommendations. Word spread quietly, exactly the way she liked it. Meanwhile, the lumber trucks kept arriving every Thursday. The piles never seemed smaller. Every load contained another future tabletop, another bench, another possibility. One humid July afternoon, a furniture designer traveling through town stopped at the winery. He spent nearly 20 minutes studying one of Margaret's oak tables. Finally, he asked the owner, "Who made this?" The owner smiled. "Local woman. Can I meet her?" 3 days later, the designer arrived at Margaret's workshop. He walked slowly around the building, examining stacked slabs, drying racks, finished furniture, everything. He said very little. Eventually, he stopped beside one completed dining table, ran both hands across the grain, then smiled. "This isn't scrap wood." Margaret folded her arms. "I know." The designer looked toward the enormous oak piles behind the fence. Then back again. "You have enough material here for years." Margaret nodded. "Probably." Long pause. Then he asked the question that would change everything. "Have you ever considered selling outside the county?" The question stayed with Margaret all week. Have you ever considered selling outside the county? Until that moment, she hadn't. Not seriously. The workshop kept her busy enough. Every table sold before she finished the next one. Restaurants recommended her. Lodges ordered matching sets. Families waited months for custom pieces. Business felt steady, comfortable. The furniture designer looked around the workshop again. Stacks of drying oak lined one wall. Finished tabletops leaned carefully against another. Outside, another truck from the lumber yard was already backing toward the familiar dumping spot. The driver waved. Margaret waved back. The designer smiled. "You know, most companies pay thousands for lumber like this." Margaret looked toward the fresh pile. "I've never paid $1. He laughed softly. "That's exactly why you should think bigger." A month later, he invited Margaret to a regional furniture exhibition. At first she refused. Then Nathan convinced her. "You've got nothing to lose." She loaded 3 dining tables onto a borrowed trailer. 1 farmhouse table, 1 modern live-edge design, 1 traditional trestle table. Every piece came from what everyone else called scrap. The exhibition hall looked intimidating. Large furniture companies occupied enormous displays. Professional lighting, elegant branding, teams of salespeople. Margaret's booth consisted of 3 tables, a folding chair, and a handwritten sign. She expected very little. Instead, people kept stopping. Not because of the sign, because of the wood. Visitors ran their hands across the flowing grain. They studied the natural edges, asked where the oak came from. Margaret always gave the same answer. "Behind my fence." Most assumed she was joking. By the end of the first day, all 3 tables had sold. By the second day, she had collected enough business cards to fill an entire notebook. Interior designers, boutique hotels, restaurant owners, architects. One buyer finally asked, "Can you produce more?" Margaret hesitated. "I think so." The following year changed everything. She expanded the workshop, not into a factory, into a larger craftsmanship studio. 3 local woodworkers joined her. Then 2 more. Young craftsmen who wanted to build furniture instead of framing houses. Every Thursday, the lumber trucks still arrived. Only now the piles disappeared almost as quickly as they arrived. One afternoon, the lumber yard manager stopped by. He watched employees sorting fresh white oak, then laughed. "You know?" Margaret looked up. "What? We used to pay thousands every month to throw this stuff away." She smiled. "I remember." He shook his head. And now we're delivering your inventory. Margaret laughed. Looks that way. The county still didn't understand. At least not completely. People noticed more workers, more trailers, more deliveries. But they assumed Margaret simply had a busy woodworking hobby. The nickname changed. She was no longer the junk collector. Now she became the table lady. The jokes continued. One Saturday morning at the diner, Dale Harper looked out the window as another trailer loaded with finished furniture rolled past. There goes another table. Rick laughed. How many people need tables? Margaret happened to walk inside just then. Dale smiled. Business good. Margaret nodded. Barry, still making tables from garbage? Still. He laughed. I'll never understand it. Margaret smiled politely. You don't have to. 2 years later, a photographer from a national home design magazine visited the workshop. He spent an entire afternoon capturing the furniture, the oak piles, the hand tools, the old drying sheds. He loved the story almost as much as the furniture. When the article appeared, something unexpected happened. Design blogs picked it up, then interior designers, then furniture buyers across the country. Emails arrived faster than Margaret could answer them. Waiting lists stretched to 8 months. Nathan walked into the office carrying another stack of orders. He dropped them onto the desk. You're going to need help. Margaret looked at the pile. I know. Lots of help. She smiled. I know. The biggest surprise arrived 6 months later. An executive from a nationally known furniture retailer requested a visit. Margaret nearly declined. She assumed someone else would handle accounts that size. Instead, a small team arrived at the workshop one rainy Tuesday morning. They spent hours walking through every building, examining joinery, watching sanding, studying finishing techniques. Finally, the lead buyer stopped beside one massive white oak dining table. He rested both hands on the surface, closed his eyes briefly, then smiled. This is exactly what we're looking for. Margaret remained quiet. The buyer continued. We're launching a collection built around authentic American craftsmanship. Long pause. We like your tables to be part of it. Silence filled the workshop. Nathan looked toward Margaret. Margaret looked toward the giant oak piles beyond the window. Then back again. You're serious? The buyer smiled. Very. Negotiations lasted several months. Margaret insisted on keeping production in her hometown. No overseas manufacturing. No particle board. No veneers. Solid American white oak. Hand-finished. The retailer agreed. Orders began the following spring. For the first time, dining tables crafted from discarded oak behind Margaret's fence appeared in beautiful furniture showrooms across the country. The county still didn't know. Not until one Saturday, Dale Harper and his wife drove to the city shopping for furniture. They wandered through a home furnishings store. His wife suddenly stopped walking. Dale. What? She pointed. No. He frowned. What? The display featured a massive live-edge white oak dining table beneath elegant lighting. A small sign beside it listed the maker. Margaret Hale Workshop. Dale stepped closer. Read it again. Then once more. No. His wife smiled. I think that's your table, lady. The drive home felt unusually quiet. Monday morning the diner filled earlier than usual. Dale carried a furniture catalog beneath his arm. He dropped it onto the breakfast counter. No. Rick looked up. What now? Dale opened the catalog. Beautiful photographs covered the pages. Right in the center, Margaret's dining table. The room became silent. Someone finally whispered. She built that. Dale nodded slowly. From the lumber piles. By lunchtime, the entire county knew. That afternoon, the lumber yard manager delivered another truckload of white oak. Only this time, several employees climbed down first. They stood quietly looking toward the workshop. Machines hummed inside. Craftsmen carefully assembled another dining table. Forklifts moved carefully stacked slabs. Finished furniture waited for shipment. One employee shook his head. We've been throwing away a furniture business for 13 years. The manager smiled. Looks like we have. One autumn evening, Nathan stood beside Margaret, overlooking the property. The familiar oak piles still stretched behind the north fence. Smaller now, but never gone. Beyond them stood the expanded workshop. Delivery trucks loaded finished furniture. Employees locked up for the evening. The smell of fresh-cut white oak drifted through the cool air. Nathan folded his arms. You know what still bothers me? Margaret smiled. What? They called it junk. Yes. For years. Yes. He looked toward the workshop. They laughed. Margaret nodded. I know. Long silence settled over the farm. Finally Nathan asked. So what did Grandpa actually see? Margaret picked up a rough oak slab from the newest delivery. The bark remained attached. The edges looked twisted. Most people would still call it firewood. She turned it toward the fading sunlight. Golden rays illuminated spectacular swirling grain hidden beneath the rough surface. Exactly as Samuel had done years before. She smiled. He saw the table hiding inside the tree. For 13 years the lumber yard believed it was paying to dispose of waste. The county believed Margaret Hale collected scrap. Neighbors saw firewood, cricket boards, worthless cutoffs. Margaret saw something entirely different. Possibility, patience, craftsmanship. Every Thursday another truck backed up to the fence and unloaded what everyone else had rejected. One board at a time, one table at a time, one customer at a time, until the wood once destined for the landfill became handcrafted dining tables admired across the country. Because sometimes the greatest value isn't created by finding better materials. It's created by seeing what everyone else has already decided isn't worth seeing.